that I have left. How much time do I have, Nilanjan? Just to give myself a
40 minutes. Yeah, 40 minutes.
Okay, I'll probably not take 40 minutes. I'll probably take about 30, but anyway, so that we can have more time for questions. Right. I am immediately going to jump into the text by reading an excerpt. And then after having read that excerpt, I'm going to expand the ambit of the talk. So this is coming towards the beginning of the novel. This is when the central character, that is to say RG, RG has just been exposed as somebody who's wearing a sari, and everybody is terrified. And RG is very, very disappointed that people don't seem to take very well to what he has done. But I'm going to read I'm going to read from a section that comes a little before that. When Amma was finished, she would check to make sure that the back of the sari had not risen up with the pinning of the pallu. Then move back and look at herself in the mirror. Standing next to her or seated on the edge of the bed, I too would look at her reflection in the mirror, and with the contented sigh of an artist who has finally captured the exact effect he wants, I would say, "You should have been a film star, Amma." "A film star?" She would cry and lightly smack the side of my head. "What kind of a low-class type person do you think I am?" I think that I'll come to that later, that she regards being a film star as something that a low-class type person would do. One day, about a week after the incident at my grandparents', I positioned myself outside my parents' bedroom door. When Anula arrived with the sari, Amma took it and quickly shut the door. I waited patiently, thinking Amma had not yet put on her blouse and skirt, but the door never opened. Finally, perplexed, finally perplexed that Amma had forgotten, I knocked timidly on the door. She did not answer. I could hear her moving around inside. I knocked a little louder and called out, "Amma," through the keyhole. Still no response. But I was about to call her name again when she replied gruffly, "Go away. Can't you see I'm busy?" I stared disbelievingly at the door. Inside, I could hear the rustle of the sari as it brushed along the floor. I lifted my hand to knock again when suddenly I remembered the quarrel I had heard on the night of that last spend the day. My hand fell limply by my side. I crept away quietly to my bedroom, sat down on the edge of my bed, and stared at my feet for a long time. It was clear to me that I had done something wrong, but what it was I couldn't comprehend. I thought of what my father had said about turning out funny. The word funny, as I understood it, meant either humorous or strange, as in the expression, "That's funny." Neither of these fitted the sense in which my father had used the word, for there had been a hint of disgust in his tone. Okay, so that is where I'll stop for now. But what I would want to stress upon is this particular portion where he says that the word funny, as I understood it, meant either humorous or strange, as in the expression, "That's funny." So these two particular adjectives that are used for the word funny, humorous or strange, I would wish to peg my discussion along those two sort of axes, as it were. One is that of humor, and the other is that of strangeness. And I'm going to use these two ideas of humor and strangeness to try and understand exactly how the queer body or the queer functions in a heteronormative society. So that is what I wish to do, is to say how heteronormative society deals with what it finds disgusting. And what heteronormative society does is that when the heteronormative society finds something disgusting, the not sophisticated, but the supposedly slightly less violent way of dealing with it is by pronouncing it to be funny. So therefore, look at the funny way he walks. Look at the funny way he talks. Look at the funny way he dresses. So then, when you are ascribing the word funny to a particular person, what you are really saying is that I am not threatened by what the person is doing, I'm finding it funny. Now, when you say that you're finding something funny, what exactly are you doing? When you are saying you're finding something funny, you're saying that I am laughing at it. Now, when you are laughing at it, what you're doing is that laughter is an act that establishes your superiority over the person that is being laughed at. So then laughter becomes a way in which you establish your superior position to the person that is being subjected to your laughter. So the laughter then is not some harmless response to an innocuous joke. That laughter is an act of violence. So that is the first point that I wish to make, is that laughter can be violent. Now, so therefore, what we really need to understand is if we contextualize this against, say, for example, the kind of portrayal that was very common, for example, in Western cinema for a very long time. But of course, it was fairly common till very recently in the Indian cinema as well, where homosexuality was presented as something that is funny, right? You know, and I'm going to use that sense of something being funny to talk about the way in which patriarchy normally looks at effeminacy. So how is effeminacy, and this is where I would again want to refer to that part where he says that the word funny, as I understood it, meant either humorous or strange. Either humorous or strange. So the binary that is being created in that sentence, either humorous or strange, I would want to suggest that over here, the way in which society treats the queer body, it isn't a binary. It isn't a case of either humorous or strange. It is both humorous and strange. So there is a certain kind of, it's not an either or, it is a conjunction. It is funny and it is strange. It is funny because it is strange. It is strange because it is funny. So there is a way in which the strangeness seems to elicit laughter. Now, where does that laughter come from? And this is something which I have had a lot of discussions with on the subject of jokes, because as we very well know, that there are some people who believe that, oh, you know, we live in such a politically correct world right now. These people actually use political correctness as something that is rather unpleasant. And so they say that, you know, oh, you know, we live in such a politically correct world right now that it is impossible for us to crack a joke, because if I crack a joke, somebody somewhere is going to get offended. I don't think so. I think that you can still crack a joke that is going to be funny, in which nobody is going to be offended. Those jokes are still available. But when people say that, you know, it is impossible to crack a joke that is not going to offend anyone, what they're basically saying is that the humor that circulates these days is a humor that is based on, that is predicated on denigrating a particular community, denigrating a particular identity. And because it is those jokes that are so obvious, we somehow seem to think that we cannot joke without offending anyone. The fact of the matter is that we can joke without offending anyone, but our sense of humor has become so completely patriarchal that we genuinely don't understand anymore what it is like to crack a joke which is not going to offend anyone. We seem to have lost that capacity. So what we do is, when we are laughing at someone, we are also at the same time declaring that person to be strange. And these jokes are always going to be circulated in some kind of a political echo chamber. Because when everybody is going to crack a joke, for example, against a particular community, it will be assumed that the joke will be appreciated by everybody present. I am very, very, I say this at every single discussion that I have, where people sort of say, oh, people should respect women. And I say that, respecting women is the most patriarchal thing you can imaginably do. I am tired of telling people, please don't respect women. Respecting women is a patriarchal act. Don't respect women. Take women as your friends. But that is something that patriarchy will not allow men to do. Because if men became friends of women, and if women become friends of men, then guess who is troubled the most? Or guess what is troubled the most? Patriarchy. So therefore, we have this sense of, please respect women. And I tell them that if you think that respecting women is an incredibly insulting idea, it's a terrible idea. Let me give you a very simple example. There are 4 boys sitting together in the room, and they are about to crack a joke, and they're going to say, hey, I know of this very, very funny joke. Can I say this very funny joke? And this boy is about to sort of, tell the joke when a lady walks into the room. And immediately all the boys are like, shh, okay, no, wait. And then everybody stops. The lady says, would you like to have something? And the boys say, no, thank you, ma'am. We are not going to have anything, thank you, ma'am. And then the moment the lady leaves, they say, okay, now we can tell you the joke. So if somebody says, why did you not tell the joke when the lady was in the room? To which the boy is going to say, oh, because I respect women. So do you see that over here, respect is actually not respect at all. Respect is actually, what is it? It's exclusion. You are excluding women by saying you respect women, right? So therefore, and these exclusionary tactics these are exclusionary tactics that are extremely common at the level of jokes, the offensive jokes. Yeah. So therefore, I hope we are beginning to understand that the reason why men crack, not all men, the reason why patriarchal men crack jokes on women is because they find women strange. And because they find women strange, they therefore find the women funny. So do you see how being funny and being strange are not actual binaries? They are not opposites. They're not, I am either funny or strange. They are both. Women, according to patriarchal men, are funny and strange. So the way in which women are both funny and strange to patriarchal men, queer people are funny and strange to heteronormative people. And it is that kind of relationship between the heteronormative people and queer people, and the relationship between patriarchal men and women, and there is a very, very clear parallel between the way in which these sort of, relationships of antagonism work. So what RG fails to see is that when his father uses the term funny to describe him, yes, of course, the father does not regard him to be funny in the sense that he inspires laughter, But there is certainly the sense that this is strange, and not only is it strange, it is disgusting, and it is disgusting because it is strange. So that is the way in which the whole notion of funny works in the novel. Now, if I have to expand the meaning or the actual application of the word funny in the novel, I think it's going to become very, very clear to you that although the novel is called Funny Boy, and although the title refers supposedly to Archie, but there are many characters who are funny in their own right. Now, when I say those characters are funny, what do I mean? I mean that these characters are also strange. They are also weird. They also inspire disgust. Maybe not quite to the extent that RG does, but they certainly inspire disgust. So as we go through the novel, we find many such characters, and I shall perhaps go through some of them to give you an idea as to exactly what these characters are up to. Now, those of you who have actually read the novel will know that the reason why RG is called funny is because he insists on taking the role of the bride in the game of Bride that he plays with his female cousins. So the fact that he is actually crossing a gender border, the fact that he is a boy who is playing the role of a bride in a game that is meant to be for girls, is regarded as being funny. Okay, it is not funny in the sense that it inspires humor, although some people may laugh at it, but it is funny certainly in the sense that it is strange. And it is strange. Why is it strange? It is strange because of the notions regarding gender that we have been trained in. We don't for a moment regard it as being funny. We don't regard it for a moment that it is funny that our parents are going to tell us, if you're a boy, our parents are going to tell us, don't talk to girls, don't talk to girls, don't talk to girls, don't talk to girls. And then suddenly one fine day, the parent is going to say, okay, here is a girl, please get married to her. We don't find that funny. We don't find it funny that we are not going to talk about sex at all. And then suddenly the moment we get married, we are expected to have sex. We don't find that funny. We don't find it funny that, sex is going to be such an important part of our lives, but we're never going to talk about it. The teachers won't talk about it in class because it is something that makes teachers go purple with shame. Parents are not going to talk about it in front of their children because it makes them go purple with shame. So something that is central to our lives is something that we won't talk about. Nobody finds that funny. So there are all of these funny things that patriarchy institutes that nobody finds funny. Why don't they find it funny? Because they have been cultured to think that this is the norm. But nobody finds the norm funny. The fact that nobody finds the norm funny is what is funny. That is the funny part. What is strange is that in the name of patriarchy, we accept, in the name of patriarchal discipline, we accept a lot of funny things without question because we have been trained not to question them because this is the way it is. So every time somebody questions it, they then become funny. And RG therefore becomes funny because he unconsciously, with a kind of childlike innocence, he simply doesn't understand why, as a boy, he cannot be allowed to play the role of a bride. Now, here you have a very interesting figure that comes in. She comes from abroad, Tanuja. And Tanuja, of course, is a big girl. She's come from Canada, and she is a cis girl. She was born biologically female, supposedly. And when she sees this game in action, she says, why is a boy playing the role of a bride? I am a girl. I should play the role of the bride. So that is the kind of normality that Tanuja is bringing into the game. But remember, the normality that Tanuja is bringing into the game is funny because that game had already declared it normal that a boy should be dressed as a bride. I would want you to think about that for a bit. So there is a way in which the game of bride is, everybody has accepted that in the game of bride, RG, a boy, will play the role of a bride, and that to the other participants in the game is normal. So when Tanuja, a girl, wants to play the role of a bride, that becomes abnormal. That becomes funny. So the point is that exactly what is funny and what is not is something that is contingent. It is contingent. It changes. What is funny, what is not funny, what is humorous, what is not humorous, what is strange, what is not strange, they are contingent. And that is exactly what seems to be happening in the novel. So when his father decides that he is going to perhaps grow up to be someone funny, his father is actually not talking about him growing up to be a very humorous person. The father is obviously talking about RG growing up to be a strange person, growing up to be a weird person. Now, which other weird characters do we have? Well, I mean, there are several, but I think the one other supposedly weird character that jumps out at you from the novel is, of course, and then she's probably my favorite character in the novel, Radha Auntie. Now, the character of Radha Auntie is extraordinary. And I think the reason why she's so extraordinary, I'll tell you why, is because Radha Auntie, she, you know, if you think that RG is funny, remember that RG is not entirely strange, because in RG's head, he has also nurtured, he has also nursed certain very patriarchal ideas regarding femininity, regarding masculinity. Although he, see, this is the strange irony, is that he worships certain gender stereotypes, but he himself does not perform those gender stereotypes. So there is a wonderful contradiction that we find in RG. Now, when he hears that Radha Auntie is going to come to Sri Lanka to get married, he begins to imagine Radha Auntie in a certain way. How does he imagine Radha Auntie? He imagines Radha Auntie as somebody who looks like Malini Fonseca. Now, Malini Fonseca is a Sri Lankan superstar. She was very, very well known, especially in the Sri Lankan movies of the black and white era of the 1960s, 70s, yeah? So Malini Fonseca was very, very well known. She was a superstar of the Sri Lankan screen. So in a very interesting way, Malini Fonseca sort of embodied Sri Lankan womanhood. And when RG is expecting Radha Auntie to look like Malini Fonseca, what he is actually doing is she is dumping a certain gender stereotype onto Radha Auntie, but in a very strange way, he himself has not been following the gender stereotype of what it means to be a boy. So I am going to disregard gender stereotypes myself, but I'm going to expect gender stereotypes from you. And this is the interesting contradiction, I think, which makes RG into a really complex character. You know, those of us who think that Arg is somebody who is just sort of victimized and who's just sort of sad and lonely and misunderstood. I think that is a remarkable oversimplification of the character of RG. Because what you really must understand is that RG is very complex in himself. He carries within himself a lot of patriarchy. And maybe that is something that we really need to understand. So when he finally comes to meet Radha Aunty, she is at first glance a huge disappointment to RG. Because in RG's head, and I think this is something which is very interesting, in RG's head, he has imagined Radha Aunty to be the heroine of this story that he has formed in his head, which involves, in his own words, romance and marriage. See, that is how he is unconsciously patriarchal himself. He equates romance with marriage. Poor child. Nobody has told him that romance and marriage have nothing to do with each other. Marriage is marriage. It is a social, financial, religious construct. Romance is something completely different. But this is something that RG himself never realizes. He collapses romance and marriage. He thinks that both of them are the same. And this is where I think Shyam Selvadurai uses the word Radha very cleverly, because this is where I'm actually referring to the mythological figure, Radha, the beloved of Krishna. Now, anybody who is familiar with the story of Radha Krishna will know that in the case of Radha and Krishna, romance and marriage did not coincide. There was certainly romance, but there was no marriage between Radha and Krishna. They never married each other. So therefore, Radha, simply by being called Radha, is drawing our attention to the fact that RG is remarkably naive in suggesting that romance and marriage are part of, they're sort of organically linked together when they are patently not, right? So RG therefore brings in his own very patriarchal notions to his approach to Radha Aunty. He's very disappointed because Radha Aunty doesn't quite look the way in which he expected Radha Aunty to look. But his attitude towards Radha Aunty changes, however, when Radha Aunty helps RG to get dressed as a woman. So that is when RG thinks, oh, wow, other people laugh at me, but you are not laughing at me. You are actually helping me to put on makeup. You are helping me to get dressed. So I think we can be friends. Now, this is where it becomes a very interesting, this is again a case of a funny friendship. It's a funny friendship. Why is it a funny friendship? It's a funny friendship because it's a strange friendship. It's a queer friendship. Why is it a queer friendship? Because over here, a friendship is developing between an adult heterosexual woman and a minor, supposedly, I mean, he'll gradually realize his sexuality, but a minor homosexual boy. It's an extremely unusual relationship. It's a very unusual friendship. But it is this completely queer, completely strange, completely beautiful friendship that develops between Radha Aunty and RG. And this particular friendship then, I think, is something which we will have to regard as being a very central motif of the novel, because Radha Aunty herself is going to get involved with people whom she will not be allowed to marry, right? So Radha Aunty herself is a very funny woman. She does not obey the patriarchal rules that, I mean, for as long as she can help it, she does not obey the patriarchal rules until, of course, she succumbs to patriarchy. A suitable match is found for her and she does get married and everything happens. But certainly Radha Aunty starts off being a very unconventional person, a very funny person. And that is something which, of course, is not sustained till the end. Something that I would very, very carefully ask you to note is that, and this happens in page 70, where she says, and I love this particular phrase that she uses. She says, she asks RG to regard her as a friend, not a lady. She says, don't regard me as a friend, not a lady. So when she says that regard me as a friend and not a lady, I would want you to pause a little bit right there to try and understand exactly what is going on over there. Regard me as a friend, but not as a lady. So therefore, there is some kind of a binary that is happening over here. You've got friend on the one side, you've got lady on the other. Is it a binary? Yes, it is a binary. Because friendship is something that patriarchy finds very, very troublesome. Patriarchy does not like friendship. Patriarchy does not like friendship. But patriarchy likes the stereotype of the lady, of the gentleman, of the man, of the woman, of the boy, of the girl, of the homosexual, of the heterosexual. Patriarchy loves these very, very gendered categories. What gender is the word friend? Is friend male? Is friend female? No. Friend is a gender neutral word. And because friend is a gender neutral word, that word, and indeed friendship, therefore, is extremely threatening to patriarchy. And Radha Aunty is very clear about it. She says, regard me as a friend, don't regard me as a lady. Don't think of me as a lady. So when she is saying, don't regard me as a lady, what she is primarily doing is she's saying, I don't care for patriarchal nomenclatures. I don't care for patriarchal naming. I am only interested in friendship, and that is all that I shall basically do. So what we really have to understand then is that we are looking at this rather extraordinary figure. And remember that RG himself is unable to cross certain boundaries that Radha Aunty does cross. Because she crosses the boundary of gender, she becomes friends with a young boy. She crosses the boundary of sexuality, she's a heterosexual, she becomes friends with a homosexual boy. She crosses the boundary of ethnicity because she gets into a relationship with a Sinhala man. She crosses also the boundary of class because she also confides in the maid Janaki. So therefore, there are so many barriers that Radha Aunty breaks. Radha Aunty breaks more barriers than RG himself does. Right? So therefore, what we really need to understand then is that there is a way in which this novel has rather beautifully smuggled in, and I mean, this is where I think I'll stop now and I'll take questions, is that I think Shyam Selvadurai has done something rather wonderful. He's a great smuggler. Shyam Selvadurai is a smuggler because he has smuggled in, non-normativity, sort of, a strangeness, queerness into the novel in a very unsuspecting way. Everybody is prepared to discover that RG is going to grow up to be a homosexual boy. Everybody is prepared to think that RG will have a sexual relationship with another boy. Everybody is aware of this, but what people, so that is why it's called Funny Boys. So when you know that the novel is Funny Boy, you automatically assume that the novel is going to be about RG. But I think the secret weapon of the novel is Radha Aunty. And I think Radha Auntie's of course, Radha Auntie ultimately, like I say, she succumbs to patriarchy. But the fact that she succumbs to patriarchy does not take away from the fact that she fought while she could, right? And I think it is this particular idea that we have to keep in mind when we are reading the novel, because we will find that there are other characters who are also trying to push against certain boundaries. There are other characters, I'm going to let you find that out. But I think, if we can use Radha Auntie as a clue, I think it is going to help us understand how the novel is structured and how the funniness of the novel is not restricted to RG, but it is very beautifully spread all across the narrative. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. I mean, as always, we were mesmerized and we were enlightened, and new vistas of reality opened in front of us. I'm not at all qualified to review your speech. The only thing that we can say is that we are so thankful for your presentation. Now, I would leave the session.